listening to a Brawl Network production. This is a podcast for the best fans in the NFL.
Are you in the Mafia?
Am I in the what?
It's time for a Bills Brawl podcast.
Second down and 7, Kelly with the tide. Touchdown! Bill Bush!
Allen. Deep shot. Touchdown! On the line to Stefon Diggs.
And Thurman breaking tackles at the 22, inside the 10, touchdown Buffalo.
And away we go, another episode of Bills Brawl. I'm your host, Mike Lindsley, all a part of the Brawl Network. Hit us on Twitter at Network Brawl and at Bills Brawl. And hey, by the way, don't forget to find those icons out there. Spotify, Google, Apple, wherever you listen to podcasts on your smartphone device. For example, Apple Podcasts, you find that purple icon, that podcast logo. You tap it, then you go down and hit search. Type in Bills Brawl, subscribe, download, rate, review. Really appreciate it. Helps an awful lot. We have a couple of unbelievable guests to bring on to this week's episode to chat about the Bills offseason, J.J. Watt going to Arizona, free agency, the draft, all rolled into that offseason, next steps for certain players. I want to get into Ed Oliver a lot on this podcast as well in terms of him being, I think, the guy on defense to take the next step. You know, a lot of people think that it's just a matter of the Bills plugging and playing. Well, if you cut these three, you plug in these three, and it's just the same, and off we go, man. It's a Super Bowl team. Got to get to the Super Bowl. And it's not quite that simple. And also, I don't even know if there's a lot more outside your doors. I'm kind of with Sean McDermott. You kind of want to leave the team as close to it was last year when they ended up being one of the final four teams in the NFL playoffs in the AFC Championship game, coming up one win short of a Super Bowl, losing at Kansas City. To me, I would rather see the players currently on the Bills take an extra step as opposed to going out and getting guys who aren't already inside the Buffalo Bills walls. In other words, Ed Oliver, one of those guys, he'd be in a top 10 pick. He's a guy the Bills drafted with the intention of being a very, very scary edge rush defender, which the Bills clearly need help in that department right now. But you think about that, forget about Ndakwe, forget about, now J.J. Watt's in Arizona, you forget about him anyway, but, think just for a second, if Ed Oliver took a huge step forward and A.J. Epinesa took a huge step forward, wouldn't matter what free agents you did pick up in Western New York. Let's bring in the first guest of the Bills Brawl for this week, a good friend of mine, a terrific Buffalo Bills reporter for the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. You can follow him on Twitter at Sal Maiorana and check out his awesome pieces across the board, one of the best journalists out there at salmaiorana.com. And he also has his own podcast called Sal Speak, all over the major platforms. Go check that out. Sal, welcome.
Good to be with you, Mike.
So there's obviously a lot of talk in the offseason with the Bills. They didn't get J.J. Watt. He goes to Arizona. Way too much money, I thought, especially guaranteed money. But, they need an edge rusher. They got to go out and get people. What about what they have in-house? I mean, I know there's going to be some restructuring probably from the defensive line standpoint, probably some cuts. Addison, Jefferson, Butler, we'll see what happens with those guys. But I look at a guy like Ed Oliver and a guy like Epinesa. I mean, if they have a couple of their guys now on the roster who take that next leap, it might not matter who they go out and get. Is that fair to say?
Well, yeah. I mean, first of all, on the Watt point, I totally agree with you. I was never on board with them bringing him in. Because it was going to cost a ton of money in a year when they simply don't have it. But also, I think he's a declining player. He's not the same J.J. Watt who won 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards. So I think it would have been money poorly spent. So I'm glad that didn't happen. Now, based on what they have currently, look, they spent more money on their defensive line than any team in the NFL last year, and they did not get, I don't think, close to that type of production. So you've got Jerry Hughes, going to be 33 years old. Addison, I believe, is right around that age. So they're going to have to do something. But I think your point A.J. Epinesa and Oliver, they've got a couple pieces that are in place. They need those guys to take big jumps next year. Oliver, to me, has not come close to being the number 9 overall pick for 2 years. He's been a good player, certainly not a difference maker. Epinesa had a kind of a rough rookie year. I think a lot of that had to do with, not having the off-season program and him getting off to a slow start. They hope that Darryl Johnson can someday become something. But, look, I would expect that if they showed that much interest in J.J. Watt, and based on what Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott said about the pass rush needing to get better, they're probably going to do something. But, Mike, if you're asking me who that might be, I have no idea. Because, again, it's such a weird year to try to project what they're going to do because we just don't know how he's going to operate all these contracts. Is he going to cut players to create space? Will he, redo contracts to create space? It's a really hard year to predict what they might do there.
It was obviously a record-setting, amazing year for both Allen and Diggs. Stefon Diggs, we know there was a little bit that he didn't like in Minnesota. Some of it was on the Minnesota side. Some of it was just being a diva wide receiver with Diggs. He wanted the ball more. Nothing wrong with that, but then maybe some of the extras that you heard come out of the walls from Minnesota. He hasn't been a problem in Buffalo in 1 year. He was the key acquisition in the offseason. But as time goes on, he'll probably keep getting the ball. He's going to put up more yards, etc. But if they start losing a little bit, or if he has a game or two where he doesn't get the ball as much, do you think that in the future Stefon Diggs will be a problem at all for this team?
Well, that's a tough question. I don't know the guy at all, thanks to not being in the locker room at one point this year. I haven't even talked to the guy face to face, so I have no idea what his character's about. Obviously, didn't cover him in Minnesota, so I really can't answer that question, Mike. All I know is he came into this team last year and was an instant hit in the locker room from what we were told, right? I mean, the coach said often that, he was definitely a guy who brought players together. Josh Allen and he bonded immediately, starting with that little get-together down in Florida. And then the receivers, whenever they would do Zoom calls, they would be asked about Diggs, and they all said that the guy was great. He was willing to help everybody, and, on top of being a great player. So there's no doubt. I think he fit right in with the Buffalo culture, with this Buffalo team. And look, he's on an underpaid contract right now, which he signed in Minnesota. I would think the Bills are going to do right by him and probably try to give him an extension with more money. He deserves that after the season he had. So I think it'll work out with Diggs in Buffalo. Again, I thought it seemed like, unless he was lying through his teeth, he seemed like he really, really bought into what McDermott's trying to create over there, and he liked being in Buffalo. Look, the guy just played in Minnesota for 4 years. I mean, Buffalo is not that much different than Minnesota. So I think it's going to be fine. I think he's a kid that might have been a bit misunderstood during his time with the Vikings, but I think it's going to be fine moving forward.
Yeah, he's so exciting to watch. There's no doubt about that. Sal Maiorana, the terrific Buffalo Bills insider, with us here on the Bills Brawl. I'm Mike Lindsley. You can get Sal on Twitter at Sal Maiorana, salmaiorana.com, and Sal Speak, the podcast, all over the major platforms. A couple of players I kind of want to throw into a group. What's next for the Dawson Knox running backs, Tremaine Edmonds, those kind of guys who are maybe in that 1 year, couple of year window where it's like, all right, we kind of have to figure out, if you're Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, we got to figure out who these guys are and what they could be moving forward. Those four are intriguing to me: Knox, Moss, Singletary, and Edmonds, because they all kind of have that little thing in common, don't they, Sal?
Yeah, I mean, those are all key positions, and I'll address them here one by one. Tight end, look, it seems pretty clear, just based on what they said in their season-ending Zooms, that they need more production at tight end. We all know that, too. And there's a couple guys out there. Hunter Henry might be a possibility. Kyle Rudolph just got cut by the Vikings last night, 10-year veteran. He would probably come in and be a great addition to the tight end room as a leader. He still can play a little bit. But I'll tell you what, Dawson Knox, for as inconsistent as he's been for 2 years, I still believe there's something there, Mike. And I don't know. I can't really back it up with statistics, but you look at that kid's size. He's 6'4", 245 pounds, I think, right around the same size. I mean, Kelsey, I think, is 255, and he's 6'5". So they're similar in size. Clearly not the same player, but I think he's got the athletic ability to become a productive player at the position. And I think the Bills want to give him the opportunity, but I also think that they're going to probably bring somebody in who at least is going to push him, if not be a mentor, because they're not going to bring Lee Smith back. So I'm still on board with trying to give Dawson Knox the runway to come through in his third year. I think it's possible that he can do it. But I understand if they want to move on, or if they want to get somebody else in there and have him be a role player. Running backs, tricky situation, Mike. They've spent 2 third-round picks in the last 2 years on Singletary and Zach Moss. You've seen the mock drafts. Mel Kiper and Todd McShay both had him taking Najee Harris with the 30th pick. I just don't see that happening. And I think the biggest problem with the run game last year actually was twofold. I thought their offensive line was just not a good run-blocking line. They're very good in pass protection. They do not win often enough at the point of attack. And too many plays are getting blown up as soon as the guy has the ball. And then the other issue is that neither Moss or Singletary is really a game-breaking type of guy. They might make the first guy miss or break a tackle, but they just don't have that gear to turn maybe a 3-yard run into, even an 8-yard run. You know what I mean? I mean, those are the key plays. If you could turn 3 yards into 8 yards by making something happen, that keeps the chains moving. Neither one of those guys seems capable of doing that. I would think that they're going to try to roll the dice and go with those guys again next season. I think Moss should get more playing time than Singletary. But again, I could see them picking a running back at some point in the draft and at least having competition. And then the other position, Tremaine Edmonds, it's just an enigma. I just don't know. We've seen this guy for 3 years now, and we've heard all this, he's a great athlete, sideline to sideline. Mike, the guy just doesn't make enough plays. He makes tackles. He's the London Fletcher. Go back to London Fletcher's days. The guy made 1,000 tackles, and they were all 5 yards downfield. I think Edmonds he had 4 tackles for loss in 2020. 4. He's supposed to be a dominant, player sideline to sideline, getting penetration, reading plays and blowing through. He just doesn't do it. And I think it's frustrating. I think they're probably going to exercise the 5th-year option because he's still so young and you can't give up on, his potential. But he really is an enigma. And if I had a choice, Mike, between Milano and Edmonds, and they don't have a choice, obviously, because they're probably not going to be able to afford Milano, I would keep Milano over Edmonds just about every day of the week.
I would, too. Milano's where I was going next, too, because, gosh, Sal, you and I being Yankee guys, we know, when Aaron Judge is in there, when he's healthy, he's great, but he's always injured. And Milano gets injured quite often as well. So, but when he's in there, again, the impact, he's everywhere. I mean, he's the opposite of Edmonds, as you mentioned. He's sideline to sideline. He's making tackles, stopping the run game. He's great on third down. He gets to the quarterback when he wants to. I mean, he's a menace. What do you do? I know you said that you probably can't afford him, and I agree. He's going to be 13 to 15-ish million probably per year. But do you sacrifice someone somewhere, to make sure that you've got Matt Milano? Do you do that? Do you pull that drastic a move to make sure that you can keep him?
Well, I pointed out, and I think most guys have pointed out, they are going to cut players and they're going to save some money. I think John Brown is an obvious candidate. There's a few others that I could go through. They will be able to cut guys to create space. But I think the problem, Mike, is, like you said, he is injury prone. He's not been able to stay on the field regularly for an entire season. And the fact that, as good as he is, I love him as a player, the fact that he's not a pass rushing linebacker, and those are the guys that get the money, that's what's going to prevent the Bills, I think, from investing in Matt Milano. I don't agree with that. I think if you got a guy who makes as many plays as he does, both against the run, and he's very good against the pass, not as a rusher, but as a cover guy, I think you do invest in him. But it's just the culture of the NFL that type of player is not going to get that. $15 million a year contract. They want that guy to be someone who can rush the passer and create havoc in the backfield. I think he's a great player, but I don't think they're going to have the wherewithal to be able to bring him back. And you know what? To be quite honest, I think they knew that at the start of the year when they didn't give him the contract extension. I think it was more about, look, this guy has not been available enough to us, and we could probably go find someone in the draft. It's a fifth-round pick. So they hit a home run with him. They're probably thinking they could probably find someone in the draft that they could plug in there and take his place.
There's a lot of former personnel people. I heard Jim Monas on with Tyler Dunn the other day saying, hey, if the Bills lose a guy here, a guy there, Milano, wherever, I'm paraphrasing, don't worry about it because they have Josh Allen. They finally figured out the quarterback. They have the GM and they have the head coach. Are you confident enough to now feel that way, right? Like the Bills have the three pieces you need to contend for a championship where if you lose a guy here, a guy there, that main core is there and it's just going to make everybody else around them better. Plus they obviously have major weapons on both sides of the ball anyway. But that big three, Sal, I mean, you can have a lot of other things on a football roster, but if you're missing two of the three, if you're missing, a head coach quarterback, if you have a front office that hasn't quite figured it out yet, but they're getting there, man, it seems like the Bills have got 1, 2, and 3. Those boxes are checked, and then everything else kind of falls in line and surrounds the team for the puzzle. Do you feel that way that, hey, we're confident moving forward even if we lose people because you got McDermott, you got Allen, you got Bean?
Yeah, you're right. That's the gold standard. When you get those three positions competently filled, and they certainly do. At least, we're 1 year into the Josh Allen breakthrough. Hopefully he can, continue on that upward spiral because, we've seen guys, Jared Goff is the one that everyone points to, got the big deal and suddenly stunk. I wasn't a big fan of his from day one, but it did happen. There's been other guys too, so you hope Allen continues his ascension. But assuming he does, there's no doubt those situations are locked and loaded for the Bills. Now, the issue becomes, you've got to maintain the roster. How many great quarterbacks through the years have we seen, right? Great quarterback gets the big money, and then they can't maintain the roster. I fear that when they do give Josh Allen the mega contract that he's going to be getting here pretty soon, their hands are going to be tied a little bit with, keeping that roster up to date with excellent players. Teams in the past have been able to do it, but Buffalo always fights the same problem. Like, even when it's winning now, they still have that problem that it's Buffalo. J.J. Watt might have wanted to, if he's looking to go to a Super Bowl or contend for a Super Bowl, if it came down to Arizona and Buffalo, it should have been Buffalo, right? But it wasn't. Because Buffalo is Buffalo. New York State has the taxes. Arizona doesn't. They still fight that problem of bringing the best players in here to sign as free agents. Stefon Diggs was a trade. He didn't have a choice in that matter. He had to come here because he got traded. So that's the worry I have. You've got those three guys in place, but you've got to maintain the rest of the roster or Josh Allen. Look at what Josh Allen was in 2019 as compared to 2020 when they finally gave him legitimate weapons. That makes a big difference. He can't do it by himself. He needs help.
Sal, final one for you. You kind of mentioned a little bit about the draft earlier. Obviously, the draft's such a crapshoot. The mocks and all that sort of thing. After a while, you're like, okay, let's just get it on already. And the Bills pick late. Obviously, that's a good thing. That means that you're really good at 30. I think it would be a waste to take Najee Harris out of Alabama as well. I mean, taking a running back that early. Where do you see them, though, going first round and beyond, trade up, trade down? I've been saying for a while, I wouldn't be surprised if Brandon Beane surprised some people and traded up to get the guy he wants because he's aggressive and the window is open to win now. How about your overall Bills draft thoughts here, where they go up, down, etc.? Take it away.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Beane has proven to be a guy who likes to take chances, likes to move around. If there's somebody that they love and they think they can get him without giving up too much. I mean, they're at number 30. I doubt they're going to make a move where they can get to the top 10. That would be too costly. But he might jump up a few spots if there's a guy on their board that they really want. That's never out of the question. And same thing with trading down. If he doesn't think there's value at number 30, and let's face it, when you start getting to 30 in the first round, you've got to pay that guy a first-round salary, if you want to jump back, 5 or 6 spots and not have to pay the first-round salary, that you might want to do that. Again, when you're picking, say, top 15, Mike, you want that guy, A, to be a hit, and B, you get that fifth-year option if the guy does come through for you and you want to keep him for that extra year of control. Once you're out of the first round, you can't do that. So I would expect him to stay at 30, but it wouldn't surprise me either way if he went up or down. Now, as far as who they would target, to me, they've got to find a cornerback to play opposite Tre'Davious White, and I don't know if that's going to be the number 30 overall pick, or if they want to sign a free agent again with the money being so limited. They might not get the guy that can truly come in and be the stud number 2 cornerback, but that's the position you look at. And I think offensive line, look, it depends what they do. I think they want Feliciano back. Mitch Morse, I love the guy, but I could see them cutting him. I could see them cutting him to save money, move Feliciano to the center position, and then you go with Cordy Ford as a guard. What do you do in tackles? Darrell Williams probably is leaving, so I think offensive line is a prime spot that they should be thinking about with that first round pick. Other than that, I don't know. What else do they need, right? Maybe a linebacker to replace Milano, but they also have 7 picks, so I wouldn't put everything on that first rounder. But that's what I would think about is cornerback and offensive line for that first pick.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what. If Bean decides to get aggressive and trade up and get a guy, the couple of big needs, the edge rusher big need as well. I've had my eyes on J.C. Horn out of South Carolina, a corner, and I look at him at that size, 6'1", 6'2", 210, and is just can be a potentially great corner in the league and a blanket guy. I look at something like that where, a Brandon Bean who has his eye on somebody, the look, I'm going to go get him, that aggressive nature, to pull all the stops to get that guy to shore up a major position need on the roster. I would love something like that. Sal.
Yeah, I agree. Look, Levi Wallace has been an okay player. You can do worse than him, but they've clearly tried to get better, right? They brought in Kevin Johnson the year before. They brought in Josh Norman this past year. They realized that Levi Wallace is probably not good enough to be a full-time starter. They've kind of had to go with him because those other 2 guys really didn't work out. But you need to shore that up. You've got Tre'Davious White locked up now for the next 4 or 5 years. You need to shore that up, and I think cornerback is a prime. Look, they play nickel defense most of the time, so you need cornerback. You need at least 3 cornerbacks on the field at the same time, and then when you got injuries, you need other guys who can come right in and play. Levi Wallace would be a terrific guy to have on the roster if he's the backup. So go get somebody who could really be a stud.
Sal Maiorana on Twitter at Sal Maiorana, of course, salmaiorana.com for his awesome work, the Buffalo Bills insider and reporter for the Democrat and Chronicle in Rochester. Sal, thanks so much for the time, and hey, keep up those Sabres tweets, man. What a dumpster fire, huh?
Yeah, they are a mess, and I've pretty much stopped watching them. I'd rather watch Netflix, Mike.
Thanks so much, Sal.
All right, Mike, take care.
Always love catching up with Sal Maiorana from the Democrat and Chronicle talking Buffalo Bills football. Let's keep it rolling right now with our second guest of the episode. Tell you what a career he had in Buffalo, now doing unbelievable work in the media industry, of course, as a Buffalo Bills radio color analyst, also covering the ACC football scene on their network, the former Pro Bowl center for the Bills, and he's also got his terrific podcast all over the major platforms. What's Next with Eric Wood? Let's bring in the Buffalo Bills analyst, ACC network analyst, former terrific center for the Bills in his own right as well. It's Eric Wood on Twitter at ewood70, ericwoodmedia.com. Eric, good to catch up.
It's all good. Thanks for having me on, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Bills go into, the draft and making some tough decisions, of course, with the cap and all that. Where do you think, their biggest, sacrifice they may make in order to keep somebody they really, really need? In other words, could you see, hey, let's cut player XYZ, make that sacrifice because we really do have to keep. I know he's injured, but we really do need Matt Milano. Something like that, where the ultimate sacrifice equals keeping somebody on the roster who they really want to have on there for 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, it's going to be so interesting the way this season works out, or this offseason works out, because you're going to have a lot of movement. There's going to be a lot of cap casualties around the league, and there's going to be a lot of restructuring. A lot of GMs, Brandon Beane included, did all the things the right way, and now they're in a bad position just based upon the COVID year. So when you look at the Buffalo Bills, there's guys, and you can look at the top end of the salary cap hits for this year, where the Bills may make some decisions where they try and get guys to restructure their deals, and people can do the math on that. But when you look at it, the Bills have Matt Milano that they'd love to get re-signed. They'd love to get Darrell Williams re-signed. He played excellent at right tackle. John Feliciano was kind of the pulse of the offensive line the last 2 years, the tone setter, and everyone had said that all along. So those are all guys that they're going to identify as guys they want to bring back. You also got to get a backup quarterback. If you don't re-sign Mac Barkley, you got to go get a backup quarterback. So the Bills have a lot of decisions coming up.
What did you see in Josh Allen in 2020? What impressed you the most?
I think the obvious thing is the completion percentage. To go from last in the NFL's rookie year to last his second year to top 5 in completion percentage, jumped to 69 points of the percent this year, is absolutely remarkable. And I think a lot of that was just taking what the defense gave him. Mm-hmm. And there was still the splash plays down the field. There was monster throws down the field. A lot of those came from the addition of Stefon Diggs. But when Brian Daboll opened up the offense and committed to passing the ball the way they did this year, it really allowed Josh Allen to, on some downs, just simply take the check down, hit Cole Beasley, hit guys that were given too much cushion on the outside, and that development paid huge dividends for the Bills.
Eric Wood, our guest, a former Pro Bowl center for the Bills, a terrific analyst on Bills Radio, ACC Network as well, and go get his podcast on the major platforms. What's Next with Eric Wood? I've been listening in a lot to it, Eric. It's fantastic stuff. You're a former Pro Bowl center who knows how important that position is. Is it getting more and more important as offenses continue to evolve? We look at the Bills and Daboll and Allen and Diggs, that situation, the play in Kansas City with Mahomes and company. Is the center now even more of a premium position because of how these offenses are run? You need the protection, you need the chemistry, you got to have that anchor. Is it becoming that much more of a gold standard premium position?
Yeah, I think it always has been, and it's not one of those positions where you need a top end of the first round talent there. You just need a guy that can kind of run the show up front and then be able to get his job done. Those have come in the form of undrafted free agents. Look at a guy like Jeff Saturday, who had a long, productive career, and then you also have guys like the Pounceys or Alex Mack, who were drafted in the first round, and they hold down an organization to play really well in the pivot. You need a good center. The Bills have a good center in Mitch Morse, and as I talked about, guys that have big cap numbers this year, just because of the way that the salary cap's working out because of COVID, it may be a situation where you try to get Mitch Morse to restructure his deal. Maybe you give him some more cash. Maybe you bump the cap hit down the road a year, whatever it may be. That may be a position that you look to restructure. But I also think it would be silly just to cut Mitch Morse, and then you're gaining some cap room that you'll use to get another good center in there. So, like I said, I don't envy GMs this offseason having to try to weigh decisions like that.
You have made just a complete transition, a total, just a flawless transition into media, and you do a hell of a job in everything that you do. I know that you're working hard at it still. I know that you're a perfectionist and all the rest. But was there a moment as you were making the transition into it where maybe you got done with a Bills game or got done with a college football game on the ACC network or maybe even a podcast recently where you were like, okay, like I really feel great. I feel like I'm in now. I feel like I'm a member of sports media. I've arrived. Did you have an arrival moment, Eric?
Well, there's been a number of times where I felt like, okay, I'm now on the sports media side, and a lot of those come in forms of conversations with current players where I have to preface the conversation like, hey, we are talking as buddies here. This will not be reported. So that is a different thing to get used to.
Yeah.
And that's being 100% honest. My first year out of the league, I got to call one game for Fox. It was on FS1. It was a college football game. And when I got done with that game, I told my wife afterwards, I said, I had to prepare for this. It wasn't easy work. My heart got racing because I was excited about it. I was around football conversations. I was around the game. And that's kind of when I knew that this is something I wanted to pursue. I wanted to be around football. I wanted to talk about sports and do this type of deal for a living. But honestly, you're like me, Mike. You're in the media. You're extremely well-spoken. If you can have conversations for a living, then there's a lot worse ways to make a living.
No doubt. You're a career Bill. I know it got cut short, but you're a career Bill, and you're going to have that, and you're always going to be a major part. And I know you went through a lot of losing and a lot of tough times, but you are, when I talk about you to my friends, when I talk about you to other people in media, former players, etc., people's voices rise. When I'm in person, we're hanging out, having a couple beers and some food with my Bills buddies. People they love Eric Wood. There's a respect there, and you're like an all-time Bills great, no matter what the era is. And you're a lifetime Bill. And to be a part of that inside Bills Mafia, have you thought about what that means, like long-term? You're still only 34 years old, but like you're already considered, on the short list of Bills greats and fan favorites. People adore you. I mean, have you thought about what that means right now, but years down the line?
A little bit, and I want to start off by saying, Mike, I truly appreciate those words. They mean a lot to me, and it means a lot coming from you. I know you're sincere in those words, and it's truly humbling to hear that. And for me, I was so blessed to be able to play in one spot my whole career, and then to go to Buffalo, which is similar to where I was from in Cincinnati. And, to me, I was just comfortable there. So it was such a blessing to play my whole career there. I wish I could have played longer. And, I think I always have those feelings that, I would have loved to have been a part of this special run now. And, I'm medically disqualified, which makes it extremely easy. There's no way I can go back and play football. There's no weighing the pros and cons of maybe trying to give it another go with where my body's at 34 years old. I'm past that point. But honestly, getting back around the community and the love from all of Bills Mafia through, whether it's through social media or seeing them around, seeing them at airports, wherever I go, inevitably there's Bills fans no matter where I'm at in the country, and it's a special deal.
You redshirted your initial year at Louisville. You start all 12 games at center in 2005. You get All-American honors by a host of platforms at Louisville. Redshirting can be really, really helpful. It can really be impactful. Can you share your experience and what it did for you?
Yeah, for me, it allowed me to – I traveled with the team. I was in uniform, but I never played in a game. Now you can play up to 4 games and still not blow your red shirt. For me, it allowed me to kind of see what it was all about, let my body mature another year. And then when I stepped in as a redshirt freshman, I was obviously more developed than I would have been my true freshman year stepping in from high school. And I think it's extremely hard for true freshmen nowadays to step in and play offensive line at the college level. You're just so much younger than some of these guys you're going against, and that's a very physical position when you're playing along the line. So for me, it was beneficial. And nowadays, it's becoming less and less popular when you get these bigger recruits, and I was far from a big recruit. Louisville was my only offer, so it was probably a pretty easy decision for them to redshirt me. But nowadays, there's so many of these freshmen getting thrust into the starting lineup just based upon recruiting rankings, guys leaving early for the NFL draft, so there's holes to fill. And I got so much respect for those freshmen that are able to go in and play at a high level. Final one for you in the minute and a half we have left. You were, though, a first-rounder. I mean, you were picked 28th, in round 1 by the Bills. You go through the NFL draft process. You just brought it up. How stressful, nerve-wracking? I mean, what is that like? You get done with a season in college, and then it's all of a sudden, whoop, and you're starting to prepare for the NFL and the months and the days, weeks, and months, I guess, leading up to the draft, and then the draft hits. What's that timeline look like? How is it for these guys who are going to have to prepare for it here as we get geared up for another draft? Currently, these guys are getting ready right now. Yeah, it's a very busy time, and even though they don't have the combine in person this year, it's part of the reason why you often see rookies hit that rookie wall, because you really don't get an off season. I went straight from training with my college, playing in games, to training for the combine, going to the Senior Bowl, going to the combine, going on draft visits. Then you get drafted. Then you're up with a team immediately trying to learn a new offense. You hop into OTAs. So there's really no downtime. And like I mentioned, it makes it really tough when you really don't get to relax after your final season of college, whatever year that may be for guys nowadays, before you hop into an NFL facility. So for those guys, it's a whirlwind. But once you get through your rookie year in the NFL, and if you've already graduated, you're not going back to school, and you get to get some true downtime where you're honestly just training, you got some money in your pocket for the first time ever, you can do a little bit of traveling. That's a very enjoyable time and a much needed and well-deserved rest period for a lot of guys.
Former Pro Bowl center for the Buffalo Bills, analyst, ACC Network, Bills Radio, What's Next with Eric Wood podcast, all over the platforms. Go get it into your smartphone and check them out online at ericwoodmedia.com and ewood70. That's at ewood70 on Twitter. Eric, thanks so much. Continued success.
My pleasure, Mike. Thanks for having me on.